Hi, this is Richard, and welcome to my podcast, The Future of the World. This is episode 2, entitled The Nature of Evil. Now, I consider this conversation perhaps to be the most important conversation for us to have in order to get an understanding of what's going on in the world, and also understanding how do we exert our own power in the world, okay, in the face of things that are evil and are against humanity and against humanity's wishes, okay, that is being perpetrated by the ruling class. So an understanding of this is essential, really. Now, some people might say, no, why are you focusing on evil? You know, you're creating bad vibes, and so on and so forth. Well, the point is, we don't need to dwell on evil, okay? We don't need to lament, and we don't need to suffer through victimhood or thoughts that we're victims, and be angry and simply be shouting, they should all die, they should all hang, okay? This sort of energy. What we need to do is we need to come to understand what is the role of evil in our lives, and how can we deal with it. Okay, it's not time to ask the question, why is God doing this, and why doesn't he come here and change that? It's because this whole setup is for us to step in and take action ourselves, for us to participate in creating a better future for humanity. Okay, so we're going to look at evil now. I'll say right off the top, I don't condone evil in the world, okay? And this discussion is not about condoning evil or moral relativism. This discussion is about understanding why evil is in the world and empowering ourselves in terms of what's the best thing we can do to create the future that we want, okay? So I'm going to tell you a story, and this story came from someone who claimed to be very high up in the ruling class. And it was told to a forum on the internet. Through discussion with members, question and answer, we came to an understanding that is the basis for this story. Now, I will be putting out an article series on my website very soon, and I think it's going to be entitled Lucifer and the Ruling Class. Okay, so there will be a much more in-depth discussion of the information that came from that particular insider from the ruling class. But for now, I'm going to tell you a story that came out of that I think will help us understand where we're going here. Okay, so this takes us back to Genesis in the Bible. Okay, this takes us back to the birth of the planet and the Garden of Eden. Okay, so you'll recall the Garden of Eden was the place where humanity lived, and everything was bliss and peace, and everything was perfect. And God, who was called Yahweh in the Old Testament, walked in the Garden of Eden, and he interacted with human beings, and there was complete harmony there. Now, the only problem was that humanity as a species was not evolving. They were continuing to be like children of God, and there was no development in their consciousness. And as a result, there was no development in the consciousness of Yahweh. You have to understand that here in this story, Yahweh is not actually the God, the creator God, the one and only God. He is actually the creator of the planet Earth and of the human species. Okay? So if we understand it like that, in the bigger picture, the development of all the different planets in the solar system and the solar systems in the galaxy is based on evolution, and this particular planet with human beings was not evolving. So what happened was the council that oversees the development of planets came in and spoke with Yahweh, and they came to an agreement that they need a catalyst to come in and kind of stoke the evolution of this race of beings. And they chose Lucifer, a group soul, a highly evolved group soul called Lucifer, to come to the planet and to provide the contrast, to provide the negativity, to provide the darkness okay, in order to create a situation where humanity, human beings had a choice between good and evil. And because there was a choice, there would then be consequences of their action. Because of the consequences, there would be learning. So there would be evolution. So this would stoke the evolution. So what they did was, they set up in the Garden of Eden the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And for the first time ever, Yahweh told the human beings, you're not allowed to eat the fruit of this tree. Okay, you can do anything else, you can go to any other tree, you can eat any other fruit, but you cannot eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so human beings had their first choice between obeying and disobeying. And as the story goes, you had the serpent, who was actually Lucifer, telling the human beings that if you eat the tree, the fruit from this tree, you will gain the knowledge that will lead you to become gods, just like Yahweh. And so they did. And essentially that is the truth. That is, taking the knowledge of good and evil sets you on the course towards higher consciousness and eventually becoming as Yahweh. Okay? So they did it, and in doing so, the paradise was completely disbanded, and Lucifer became the ruler of the planet and the bringer of negativity, the bringer of darkness to the planet. Okay? So Lucifer incarnated as individuated souls, and then those souls, through a process of time, intermarried with human beings to create the 12 human bloodlines. Okay, the 12 ruling bloodlines, and then there's the 13th bloodline, which is the extraterrestrial pure bloodline. Okay, so this is the kind of the origin of the 13 bloodlines of the ruling families. Now, basically, we can say that the bloodline families have ruled the planet since antiquity. Okay, now that is obviously a very simplistic statement, and it's not taking into account a number of different forces, groups, beings, wars going on, good and evil being fought, and so on and so forth. But for our purposes, we're going to take this simplistic view and say, okay, the bloodline families have been ruling the planet since antiquity, and they're still in charge right now. Okay? And they've been able to do so secretly. Okay? And they've been able to conduct all the affairs, and this is something that not too many people know about. And many people will react and say, well, if, and I've heard it before, if they're really, the ones in charge and they're really ruling the planet, we'd know about it by now. There would be so many people, whistleblowers, telling the stories and so on and so forth. And that's kind of what I thought too, when a few years ago when I was starting to look into it. But since then, having interviewed some people, especially a few women who were victims of satanic ritual abuse when they were young, okay, and were involved in these networks and within the ruling class, I came to a much better understanding of how it would be possible for this network to continue to rule the planet in relative secret. Let's say relative secret. Of course, there is a lot of information out there. You have to dig for it. Some of it's been hidden, and so forth. But I'm going to explain to you how this structure stays together based on the conversations I've had. So to start with, the bloodline families are structured like a pyramid, okay, a power pyramid. So you are, as a member, you're somewhere in the pyramid, and you always want to rise up in that pyramid. Your goal is to get higher, to rise up, to gain status, okay? And the reason for that is that you are trained from the moment you're born to be of service to self, okay? To just care about yourself and just care about your well-being and have material desires, and you want to have more money, you want to become more famous, you want to become more powerful, and so forth. Now, why is that? Well, they have some techniques. And what they use is abuse and torture, sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, and mind control. Okay? So they have, this is what their training is. And the training basically forces the members, forces the children to become psychopaths, to disassociate, to lose their empathy. And the bonds that are left, the only bond that is left is with the person that is abusing you and the family as a whole. You are trained to be loyal to the family. Okay? It's really a very strong form of mind control which is centered in abuse. It's time tested. It works. And as I came to understand it, I came to understand how this could all be kept a secret. Okay, so the children, as they become adults, they become the abusers, and they gain more and more of a psychological need to be abusing in order to feel alive. Okay, so in that way, the cycle is complete and the chains are locked in. You're locked into that system now, and it's the only thing that's able to fulfill your needs. So you stay loyal to it, and therefore the secrecy remains. That's kind of how it all works. Now, if you're a person in the family that doesn't do well with the programming, with the training, and you're not doing well, you're not thriving. Well, you don't rise up. You just stay where you are, or you get dealt with in some way. Those who rise up, those who become real functioning psychopaths and are able to appear like charismatic and not a care in the world, and in the meanwhile having absolutely no empathy for human beings, those are the people that get placed into positions of power. And as they're placed in positions of power, the heads of the ruling class are able to advance their agenda in the world through those people. This is the situation that we find ourselves in today. Okay, that there is a ruling class, there are people in positions of power, they've been placed there, and there's a real grid of power that kind of enacts the global agenda that we see in front of us. Now, how do they get the rest of us to play along with this? Whether we know so or not, we should be able to distinguish between good and bad and so forth. But they use mind control techniques on the population as well as their own family. Okay? And they're somehow able to convince us that we don't have much power, that we're just individuals, that we should leave the ruling to them, and we should be obedient to them. We should follow the rules. We should follow the laws. This is all part of the programming in society that you get through advertising, that you get through media, that you get through television shows, that you get through royal proclamations and really everything that's going on. It's all about maintaining that control over people. Okay? They know and they realize that if they control our perception, like we talked about in episode 1, they control the way the future unfolds, because it's really the collective perception that manifests the future. Now, when we know this, and when we realize this, that our minds are highly programmable, and we start to ask the question, are my thoughts my own? Have I been programmed into thinking this or thinking that? We really start to question. That's when we start to become free. That's when we start to become powerful. So that's why it's really important for us to know and understand how the world works, so that we can now start to take back our power. Okay? Now, if you still don't believe that this is going on, well, just take a look at the pandemic. Just take a look at the fact that this ruling class has been able to get the majority of people on the planet to put on a face mask, okay, which, according to science, does absolutely nothing to prevent the spread of a virus. Okay, all the science that has been done on masking has shown that it is not effective, and there is no science that shows that masking is in any way effective in preventing the spread of a virus. And yet they've been able to convince so many people to feel better and feel protected while wearing a mask, okay? So that's one example that is very visible to us, and because it's so visible, it is actually starting to wake people up to the fact that maybe something's not right here. But waking up to the truth about this is not an easy matter for a lot of people. After all, it's not just the family members who have been indoctrinated into this service to self. It's all of our society that has been trained to be in service to self, to compete with each other, to rise above, to step over each other. This whole agenda is to get everybody to willingly be part of their power pyramid, okay? To come in at the bottom and to be willing to fight and reach and claw to get to the top, okay? In this way, they remain in power. Now, what our objective as individuals would be if we don't want this to happen, but we actually want to maintain and gain control over the future of the planet, is to recognize the evil for what it is, and also recognize it within ourselves. And ask ourselves, have we to a certain extent bought into this service to self mentality? Okay, because when we shift over to a mentality which is service to others, service to our fellow brothers and sisters, that's when we start to come together. That's when we start to unify. And that's when we start to gain the power to positively impact the future of the world.